Today's story is about a man who started keeping count. Not because he wanted to be petty, but because he needed to know if what he was feeling was real. 9 rejections, 17 days, 8 weeks without his wife wanting to be close to him. Every time he tried to talk about it, the conversation somehow turned into him being the problem. But what finally ended the marriage wasn't another rejection. It was her reaction when he stopped trying altogether. She smiled and said, "See, this is how it should be." He didn't argue or beg. He simply packed his bags. What happened afterward is something she still can't forget. Dana and I had been married for 4 years when things quietly began to change. There wasn't a huge fight or some shocking event. It happened so slowly that I didn't realize how far apart we drifted until I was already there. I worked as an operations coordinator at an architectural firm, while Dana was an account manager at a consulting company downtown. From the outside, we had a good life, a row house in Federal Hill, stable jobs, dinner together most nights, TV on the couch, and weekends spent running errands or exploring the city. We looked like any normal married couple, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. The first moment that really stuck with me happened on a Wednesday night in late September. We'd both gotten home around 6, made dinner together, talked about work, and watched a show. Everything felt normal. Around 11, we went upstairs. I wasn't expecting anything special. While she was setting her alarm, I gently touched her shoulder and kissed the back of her neck. It was simple affection, the kind that used to come naturally between us. She immediately pulled away. "Not tonight, Owen. I'm just not feeling it." I nodded and backed off. Of course. She fell asleep within 15 minutes, but I stayed awake, staring at the ceiling. I realized that was the 4th time she turned me down in just a short period. Monday, she was too tired. Tuesday, she had a headache. The previous Thursday, work had stressed her out. And now this. I counted backward and realized we hadn't been intimate in 6 weeks. I convinced myself it was only a phase. Every marriage goes through difficult stretches. Work gets busy, life becomes overwhelming, and eventually things get back to normal. I didn't want to make it into a bigger issue than it was. The next night, after we finished watching a comedy and were both laughing, I leaned over and kissed her. She kissed me back for only a few seconds before pulling away. "I have an early client call tomorrow. I really need to sleep." Dana had client calls all the time. They had never stopped us before. I simply said, "Okay," rolled over, and silently added another mark to the count I had started keeping without even realizing it. 5 rejections in just 8 days. That Saturday, with no work the next morning, I decided to make the evening special. I cooked a nice dinner, lit candles, and played a playlist we both loved. We laughed, talked for hours, and honestly had one of the best nights we'd shared in a long time. When he went upstairs, I felt hopeful again. I gently reached for her. "I ate too much," she said. "I feel bloated and uncomfortable." She'd eaten the same amount she always did, and had seemed completely comfortable all evening. Still, I told myself maybe she really wasn't feeling well. Maybe I was overthinking everything. Maybe I was seeing problems that didn't actually exist. But deep down, I knew I wasn't. Then came Tuesday, October 3rd. It had been a quiet, easy evening. Nothing stressful had happened. Around 10, as we got into bed, I simply cuddled closer to her, hoping things might happen naturally. She sighed. "Not tonight. I'm getting a headache." She never took any medicine. She never mentioned the headache again. 20 minutes later, she was asleep, breathing peacefully, without any sign that she was actually in pain. And I lay there once again, wondering if I was imagining everything or finally seeing the truth. 7 rejections in less than 2 weeks. Nearly 7 weeks without any real intimacy. At that point, I was starting to see a pattern I desperately didn't want to believe. On Friday, October 6th, I decided to be honest. I wasn't trying to argue or guilt her. I just wanted a conversation. "Dana, it's been a while. I miss being close to you. Can we talk about it?" She sighed. "I'm stressed because of the campaign launch." The problem was that campaign had ended 3 weeks earlier. She'd even told me it went great and the client loved the results. I sat there trying to make sense of it. Was a project that ended nearly a month ago really keeping her from wanting to be close to her husband? But what hurt even more wasn't the excuse. It was how she made me feel guilty for bringing it up. Somehow, wanting to be close to my own wife after more than 6 weeks became my problem. Like I was asking for too much. On Sunday afternoon, October 8th, I tried something different. Instead of waiting until bedtime, I kept things light and playful. Early in our marriage, lazy Sunday afternoons together had been one of our favorite traditions. She looked at me and said, "Owen, seriously, it's the middle of the day. That's weird." Weird. Something we used to enjoy together was suddenly weird. I didn't argue. I just let it go. By Wednesday, October 11th, it had been 8 weeks. I couldn't ignore it anymore. "Dana, is something wrong? It's been almost 2 months. If something's bothering you, I want to fix it." She looked at me and replied, "You're putting too much pressure on this. That's why I don't want to." So now it was my fault. Wanting to be close to my wife after 8 weeks was considered pressure. I was the problem, not the 2 months of rejection. The next night, Thursday, October 12th, I tried to keep things completely casual. I didn't mention how long it had been. I didn't bring up our conversation. I simply reached for her. "I'm exhausted. Can we just sleep?" The night before, she'd stayed up until 1 in the morning watching a TV show. But tonight, she was suddenly too exhausted. Saturday morning, October 14th, we both woke up rested with nothing planned. I thought maybe this was finally a good moment. She smiled awkwardly. "I haven't even had coffee yet. It's way too early." Apparently 9:30 in the morning was too early. The middle of the day was weird. At night, she was too tired. There simply wasn't any time anymore when she actually wanted me. That evening, we went out for dinner at our favorite place in Fells Point. It felt like a real date night. We dressed up, laughed, talked, and even held hands across the table. For a while, I honestly believed things were getting better. When we got home around 10, I gently reached for her one more time. "Not tonight," she said. "Let's not force it." I simply answered, "Okay." Then I rolled over to my side of the bed and made a quiet decision. I was done initiating. If Dana wanted intimacy in our marriage, she would have to be the one to reach for me, because I couldn't keep putting myself out there just to be rejected again. 9 rejections in 17 days. Almost 8 weeks without any real physical connection beyond a quick hello or goodbye hug. And every time I tried to talk about it, I somehow became the problem. I was too demanding, creating pressure, or making things weird. So I stopped trying completely. For a moment, let me step in as the narrator. Notice what Owen did. He didn't explode. He didn't send angry late-night messages. He didn't threaten divorce or start screaming. He simply stopped reaching out. Sometimes, silence says more than an argument ever could. Most people would have lost their patience weeks earlier. Owen held on for nearly 2 months. That kind of patience is rare. The sad part is Dana never noticed it. Or maybe she noticed and simply didn't care. She was about to show just how comfortable she had become with him quietly disappearing from the marriage. The next day, Sunday, October 15th, I acted completely normal. I was pleasant, helped around the house, ran errands with Dana, grabbed lunch together, and later we curled up on the couch to watch a movie. Everything looked normal on the surface. We did all the things a typical married couple would do, except I stopped trying to be physically close to her. During movies, I didn't reach for her hand. I didn't cuddle or lean in. I simply sat beside her. Dana didn't seem to notice. She looked completely comfortable with the new routine, as if nothing had changed. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday passed the same way. We talked about work, planned our weekend, decided what to make for dinner, and went through our daily lives together. But I kept an invisible wall between us. I wasn't cold or rude. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was simply neutral, like 2 roommates who got along well. She still didn't notice. On Thursday night, we were watching TV on the couch. As usual, Dana rested her feet in my lap. Normally, I would have rubbed her feet. That simple gesture often used to lead to conversation, laughter, or a little closeness. This time, I did nothing. I let her feet stay there without touching them. She never reacted. She didn't even glance at me. She kept watching the show like everything was completely normal. That was the moment everything became clear. She wanted me in the room, but she didn't want any expectation of closeness attached to my presence. She wanted me beside her without trying to connect, without reaching for her, without asking for anything more than sharing the same couch. She didn't want a husband anymore. She wanted a roommate who helped pay the bills and never complicated her life. Sunday, October 22nd, we spent the entire day together. We had brunch at a restaurant she'd been wanting to try. We walked along the inner harbor, enjoying the cool fall weather. Later, we made dinner together and watched a movie. From the outside, it looked like the perfect day for a married couple. The only physical affection we shared all day was briefly holding hands during our walk. That was it, and Dana seemed genuinely happy with that. She was relaxed, cheerful, and completely content. Meanwhile, I felt like I was living with someone who looked exactly like my wife, but no longer felt like the woman I had married. By Thursday, October 26th, my silent experiment had lasted 2 full weeks. For 2 weeks, I hadn't initiated anything. For 2 weeks, she hadn't reached for me either. She never asked if something was wrong. She never wondered why I had stopped. I kept waiting for a moment when she'd noticed the distance between us. I thought surely she'd realize something had changed. Surely she'd ask why I wasn't holding her anymore. But nothing happened. Not a single question. Not a concerned look. Not even a brief pause. She was completely at peace with the way things were. That alone told me almost everything I needed to know. Then she said the words that finally ended our marriage. We were standing in the kitchen after dinner, cleaning up together. Dana was in an unusually good mood, humming softly while loading the dishwasher. She started talking about a festival happening in Federal Hill the following weekend and suggested we go together. Everything felt light and easy. Then she smiled and said, "You know, I feel like we've been getting along really well lately." I quietly set the plate I was holding on at the counter. "Yeah. What's different?" She shrugged. "I don't know. You just seem more relaxed. Less tense." She was right. I was more relaxed. Not because things had improved. Because I'd stopped caring. I'd stopped hoping. I'd stopped setting myself up to be rejected night after night, and then lying awake wondering what was wrong with me. Then she smiled again. "It's nice. This is how it should be." I stood there trying to process those words. This is how it should be. A marriage where I never reached for my wife. Where I never pursued her. Where I never asked for closeness. Where I stayed pleasant, kept my distance, and expected nothing from her. "What do you mean?" I asked. She looked at me with a warm, genuine smile. "When we're not always focused on that other stuff, we're actually really good together." That other stuff. She meant intimacy. She had reduced one of the most important parts of a marriage to that other stuff, as if it were some annoying inconvenience she was relieved to finally be free from. She stood there in our kitchen, smiling, humming to herself, honestly happy because she believed I'd finally given up. I kept my face completely calm. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I guess you're right." But inside, everything finally clicked into place. She didn't want a husband anymore. She didn't want a husband anymore. She wanted a pleasant roommate, someone who paid half the bills, stayed out of the way, and never asked for more. And she truly believed I'd accepted that arrangement. She thought I was finally happy living the same way she was. She had no idea she'd just made my decision for me. That night, after she fell asleep, I lay awake in the dark and started planning my exit. Before we continue, let me step in for a moment. This is still me speaking, not Owen. Think about what Dana actually said. She didn't tell him she was struggling. She didn't ask for more time. She didn't say she wanted to work on the marriage. She smiled and told her husband that a marriage without intimacy was exactly how it should be. That wasn't a rough patch. That was a final verdict. And Owen understood it perfectly. He didn't overthink it or convince himself she'd meant something else. She handed him the truth, and he accepted it. The moment she smiled, she'd already lost him. The very next day, Friday, I spent my lunch break calling divorce attorneys until I found one who could see me on Monday afternoon. After work, I drove through Canton looking at apartments. I found a furnished one-bedroom with a month-to-month lease that was available immediately. I booked a viewing for Saturday morning. On Saturday, October 28th, I toured the apartment. It was small and nothing special, but it was mine, a place where I wouldn't spend every night feeling guilty for wanting basic human affection. That afternoon, I signed the lease and told the landlord I'd move in on Monday. Then I called my best friend, Kyle, and told him everything. He couldn't believe things had gotten this bad. But after I walked him through the entire timeline, The repeated rejections, the endless excuses, and especially what Dana had said in the kitchen. He understood. So, she actually told you she's happier when you stop trying? He asked. Yeah. Man, that's cold. What are you going to do? I'm leaving tomorrow. Tomorrow? Don't you think you should talk to her first? I will. Right before I leave. That evening, while Dana was out with friends, I quietly packed 2 suitcases with enough clothes for a couple of weeks. I carried them to my car, loaded them into the trunk, came back inside, and waited. Sunday morning, October 29th, the day my marriage ended. Dana slept in and came downstairs around 10 wearing her pajamas. She made herself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and started scrolling through her phone. I stood in the doorway for a moment watching her. She looked completely relaxed, completely content, like nothing in her world was wrong. When I sat across from her, she looked up. Morning, I replied. We need to talk. She put her phone down and gave me her full attention. Okay, what's going on? I'm moving out today. The confused expression on her face would have been almost funny if it hadn't hurt so much. She even laughed a little, like she'd misunderstood me. What are you talking about? I already found an apartment in Canton. I packed my things last night. I'm moving out today. She stared at me. Is this some kind of joke? Owen, what's happening? I reminded her of what she'd said in the kitchen a few days earlier. Word for word. She immediately tried to take it back. She said she'd only meant we'd been arguing less lately and that I'd misunderstood her. I shook my head. We weren't arguing because I'd already given up. For 2 weeks, I never touched you. I never reached for you. I never asked for anything. And your response was to smile and tell me this was exactly how our marriage should be. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. 2 weeks, Dana. I didn't initiate anything once. And you were happier than you'd been in months. You literally smiled and said, this is how it should be. She looked down. I just liked that there wasn't any pressure. There wasn't pressure. I waited patiently for 8 weeks. 9 rejections in 17 days. I counted every single one. Her expression changed immediately. You were counting. I was paying attention. There's a difference. She stared at me for a long moment. So, you're leaving because we haven't been intimate enough? I looked her straight in the eyes. I'm leaving because you don't want me, and you're genuinely happy about it. She kept trying to explain herself. She searched for another way to make her words sound different. Finally, I asked one simple question. Then tell me, what did you actually mean? She opened her mouth, and nothing came out. She just sat there, searching for an answer that didn't exist. That silence told me everything. Finally, she said, you're being dramatic. Every marriage goes through phases. I slowly shook my head. This isn't a phase. This is who you are. You don't want a husband. You want a roommate. That's when she started crying. Real tears. Not fake ones. Part of me still noticed. But I'd already spent too many nights lying awake after another rejection, wondering what was wrong with me. I'd already mourned the end of our marriage long before that conversation ever happened. Her tears didn't change anything. We can fix this, she said. I looked at her. Fix what? You don't even think anything is broken. You were happy. You said so yourself. She quickly replied, I'm not happy that you're leaving. I shook my head. But you were happy when I stopped trying. Those aren't the same thing. She asked if we could sit down and really talk everything through. I looked at her calmly. We're talking right now, and you still haven't said that you actually want me. You're upset because I'm leaving, not because you spent the last 2 months pushing me away. The silence that followed said everything. She couldn't say it. She couldn't even come close. She didn't want what she'd been rejecting for months. She just didn't want to deal with the consequences of me leaving. I stood up from the table. I'll come back later this week for the rest of my things. Owen, wait. I looked at her one last time. I've waited long enough. 8 weeks. 9 rejections. 2 full weeks of you not even noticing I'd completely checked out. I'm done, Dana. Then I walked out. I loaded my suitcases into the car and drove to my new apartment in Canton. It was only 3 miles away from the woman I'd married, but already felt like another world. Let me step in again for a second. This part matters. Owen didn't leave in anger. He didn't threaten to leave just to see if she'd stop him. He didn't make a dramatic speech. He simply told her the truth. She had said this was how their marriage should be. So he made it permanent. That was it. Now watch what happened once she realized he wasn't bluffing. On Monday afternoon, I met with a divorce attorney. He asked all the usual questions. Are you sure? Is there any real chance things could still change? I answered without hesitation. I'm sure. And no. He explained the divorce process. No children. Very few shared assets. It was a straightforward case that could be finished within a few months as long as Dana didn't make it complicated. Let's file today, I said. He seemed a little surprised by how certain I was, but he prepared the paperwork. I signed everything. He told me he'd contact Dana's lawyer once she hired one. My phone had been ringing all morning. 7 missed calls from Dana. A long list of unread text messages. I finally replied with one short message. The papers have been filed. My attorney will contact you. The next day, Tuesday, Dana showed up at my office. The receptionist called my extension. Your wife is downstairs asking to see you. I went down, mostly because I wanted to know what she would say. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red and swollen. It was obvious she hadn't slept. For a brief moment, I felt something. Then I remembered the 9 rejections in 17 days. I remembered her smiling in the kitchen while saying, "This is how it should be." She walked toward me. "We need to talk about this properly." I stayed calm. "We already talked. You told me what you wanted. I'm giving you exactly that. A life where nobody pressures you for that other stuff. I never said I wanted a divorce." I met her eyes. "You said you wanted a marriage without intimacy. That's the same thing." She kept insisting that wasn't what she'd meant. By then, security had started watching us. People in the lobby were beginning to stare. I wasn't going to have this conversation in front of my coworkers. "I need to get back to work. Please don't come here again, Dana. Talk to a lawyer. Sign the papers. Let's make this as easy as possible." Then I turned around, got into the elevator, and went back upstairs. For about 30 seconds, I felt guilty. Then I remembered 8 straight weeks of putting myself out there only to be rejected over and over again without a second thought. The feeling disappeared. On Wednesday, Dana sent me a 2,000-word email. She wrote about how stressed she'd been. She said she hadn't realized how serious things had become. She promised she'd work harder. She promised she'd be more present. She promised she'd show up differently if I gave her one more chance. Promise after promise filled the entire email. I read it once. Then I realized something. She never actually apologized for rejecting me. She never acknowledged what she'd said in the kitchen that Thursday night. She never admitted that she'd been relieved when I stopped trying. Instead, it was page after page of explanations and promises to work harder at something she had already shown she didn't truly want. I never replied. On Thursday, I went back to the house to pick up the rest of my things. Dana was waiting for me. It was obvious she'd prepared for this conversation. She had a lot she wanted to say. "Did you read my email?" she asked. "I did. I'm still leaving." She stared at me. "You're not even willing to try? You're not going to work on this?" I calmly shook my head. "I tried for 8 weeks, Dana. You didn't notice. You didn't care. And when I stopped trying, you celebrated. There's nothing left to work on." That's when she completely broke down. She sobbed so hard her cries echoed through the house. I kept packing, slowly, methodically, without saying much. I'd already run out of emotional reactions to her tears. There was nothing left inside me. Between sobs, she looked at me and said, "You've changed. This isn't who you are." I zipped another box shut and answered quietly. I accepted reality. "You should try it sometime." I loaded 3 boxes into my car. Then I left. No hug. No promises to stay in touch. No that emati gudvie. I just walked away. The next day, Friday, my attorney called. Dana wanted to contest the divorce. She was asking for some kind of reconciliation process before the divorce moved forward. My answer was simple. No. Later that afternoon, she texted me. "You've changed. You're being cruel." I replied one last time. "I've accepted reality. You should too." After that, I muted her number. I didn't block her. I just muted it. She could send whatever she wanted. I simply wasn't going to read it unless I chose to. Let me step in here for a moment. This detail matters. He didn't block her. He muted her. There's a big difference. Blocking someone usually comes from anger. It means they still have enough influence over your emotions that you feel the need to cut them off completely. Muting is different. It's quiet acceptance. It's saying, Asterisk, I'm done managing this. Asterisk, she could keep talking if she wanted. He just wasn't listening anymore. That kind of silence is often more powerful than any argument. Dana wanted a reaction. She wanted proof that he still cared enough to be angry. Instead, she got nothing. And that silence forced her to sit alone with the consequences of her own choices. The first few weeks in my new apartment felt strange. I'd wake up every morning and, for a split second, forget where I was. Then I'd remember. Instead of feeling sad, I felt relieved. I no longer went to bed wondering if I'd be rejected again. I didn't spend my days calculating whether tonight might finally be different. I wasn't walking on eggshells anymore. For the first time in months, I had my own space, my own routine, my own life. The first night I slept through without waking up at 2 in the morning, I almost didn't know how to react. It had been so long since I'd experienced real rest. Looking back, I realized my body had been living in a constant state of stress without me even noticing. Sleeping somewhere I didn't dread coming home to changed everything. I threw myself into work. About a month later, I got the promotion I'd been chasing for a long time. I'd probably been capable of earning it earlier, but I'd been carrying too much emotional weight to fully focus. I also started going to the gym again, something I'd completely stopped during the final months of my marriage. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with. Slowly, I started enjoying my life again instead of constantly wondering what I was doing wrong. Kyle occasionally updated me on Dana, even though I never asked. Not long after I moved out, she'd started seeing someone new. She met him through people in her professional circle. She also began posting a lot on social media. Messages about fresh starts, new beginnings, turning the page. One day, I accidentally came across one of her posts. I expected to feel something. Jealousy, anger, sadness, anything. But there was nothing. No resentment, no satisfaction, not even curiosity. I had truly moved on. Honestly, that surprised me. I thought it would hurt at least a little. It didn't. That complete indifference was the clearest proof that leaving had been the right decision. 3 months later, in February, our divorce was finalized. The divorce was finalized in February. Just like my attorney predicted, it was quick and straightforward. There wasn't much to divide. Dana kept the house. I kept my car, and more importantly, my peace of mind. The day everything became official, Kyle texted me, "You okay, man?" I smiled and replied, "Better than I've been in a year." And I meant every word. The relief was hard to explain. Unless you've lived through something like that, it's impossible to understand how freeing it feels to finally stop carrying the weight of a relationship that's already over. In April, I met Isla at an industry event through work. She worked in project design. She was smart, funny, and one of those rare people who actually listens instead of just waiting for her turn to speak. We started talking about challenges we both faced in our jobs. Before either of us realized it, nearly 2 hours had passed. As we were leaving, she smiled. "Can I have your number?" I gave it to her. We went out the following weekend. The difference was obvious from the very beginning. Isla was fully present. She asked thoughtful questions. She listened carefully to my answers. She remembered things I'd mentioned earlier and brought them up again later in the conversation. It made me feel seen. When the night ended, she leaned in to kiss me without hesitation. No pulling away. No excuses about getting up early. No making me feel like I'd crossed a line just by wanting a simple goodnight kiss. On our second date, she invited me back to her place. There were no games. No mixed signals. Just two people who genuinely wanted to be together. Lying there afterward, I realized what I'd truly been missing. It wasn't only physical intimacy. It was the feeling of being wanted, of someone choosing you without hesitation, without making you feel like affection was something you had to earn. I'd gone so long without that feeling that I'd quietly started believing maybe the problem was me. It wasn't. We kept seeing each other. At first, it was casual. We simply enjoyed spending time together. But before long, it became something real. Isla was affectionate. She showed up. Even when work got busy, she made time for us. She chose me every day, not just in the big moments, but in all the small ones that matter just as much. In July, Kyle and I met for coffee in Fells Point to catch up. About halfway through our conversation, he looked up from his cup. Dude, you're not going to believe this. What? Dana reached out to me last week. She wanted to know how you were doing. I shrugged. So, I told her you were seeing someone. What happened? Kyle shook his head. She completely fell apart. I frowned. What do you mean? She started asking if it was serious. I told her it looked like it was. She started crying. Then he looked at his phone. She kept saying, he never fought for us. He just gave up. I couldn't help laughing. I fought for 8 weeks. She never even noticed. Kyle nodded. That's exactly what I told her. She said she would have come around eventually. I laughed again. Eventually? After what? A year. 2 years. Kyle shrugged. I asked her the same thing. She didn't have an answer. He took another sip of his coffee before continuing. You know what bothers her the most? What? How happy you seem. I'm happy. Genuinely. Kyle nodded. She's been posting passive-aggressive things online about exes who move on too quickly. In her mind, you were supposed to sit around waiting. Keep proving how much you loved her by accepting whatever she was willing to give. He paused. There's something else. She's dated a few guys since that first relationship, but none of them last. She keeps telling people they're emotionally distant. They don't make enough time for her. They won't fully commit. I leaned back in my chair. It finally hit me. She was living through exactly what she'd put me through. Kyle smiled. Now she's posting about quality time, affection, and being emotionally available. Everything she never gave you. He laughed. The universe has a strange sense of humor. Later that July, Isla and I were walking hand in hand along the inner harbor on a beautiful Saturday afternoon. We were laughing about something completely ridiculous, lost in our own little world. Then I noticed someone standing about 20 feet away. Donna. She wasn't moving. She was simply staring at us. Isla noticed my expression change. You okay? I nodded. Yeah, just someone I used to know. Before we could keep walking, Dana started making her way toward us. I could have avoided the conversation, but I had nothing to hide and nothing to be ashamed of, so I stayed where I was. Dana. She quietly replied, hi. Her eyes moved back and forth between Isla and me. It was obvious she hadn't expected to see me like this. Calm, happy, at peace. I kept the introduction simple. Isla, this is Dana, my ex-wife. Dana, this is Isla. The color slowly drained from Dana's face. She clearly wasn't prepared for this version of my life. Isla, who had no idea who Dana really was, smiled warmly and said hello. For a few long seconds, the three of us simply stood there. The silence became uncomfortable. I could see Dana taking it all in, the way Isla stood beside me, the ease between us, and the simple fact that I was with someone who genuinely wanted to be there. I could see Dana taking everything in, the way Isla and I naturally stood close to each other. The comfort between us, the quiet connection that Dana and I hadn't shared for a very long time, at least not during the last year of our marriage. After a few awkward seconds, I smiled politely. We should get going. Take care of yourself, Dana. I gently took Isla's hand, and we walked away. I could feel Dana watching us until we disappeared down the walkway. Once we were far enough away, Isla looked at me. That was your ex-wife? Yeah. She seemed really upset. I gave a small shrug. That's not my problem anymore. She nodded. Fair enough. After a short silence, she asked, You okay? I stopped walking, turned toward her, and took both of her hands. I smiled. I'm better than okay. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. She smiled back and kissed me right there on the waterfront. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Once again, she chose me without making me question it for a second. About a week later, Kyle sent me a text. Dana sent you another message. You might want to read it. I'd had her number muted for months. By then, there were probably 60 or 70 unread messages waiting in that conversation. Out of curiosity, I opened the thread and scrolled to the newest one. It simply said, I understand now. I am sorry. I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me thought about replying with everything I'd been carrying for months. About all the nights I'd spent lying awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what was wrong with me. About how years of rejection slowly wore down parts of me that I didn't even know could break. Instead, I typed one sentence. I hope you find what you're looking for. Her reply came almost immediately. I already had it. I just didn't realize it until it was gone. I read the message twice, and I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no sense of victory, no desire to prove a point. Nothing at all. She had finally understood, but she understood too late. That was something she would have to live with. Not me. I didn't reply again. I blocked her number. Then I deleted the entire conversation. That chapter of my life was finally over. Dana wanted a marriage where I stopped reaching for her, where I stopped pursuing her, where I never asked for closeness, where I stayed friendly, kept my distance, and never made her feel pressured. In the end, I gave her exactly what she wanted. My complete absence. She smiled when I stopped trying. She stood in our kitchen and told me, "This is how it should be." So I made it permanent. I gave her all the space she wanted. What she never stopped to consider was what that kind of marriage actually looked like over time. She had a husband who wanted nothing more than to be close to her. Someone who spent 8 straight weeks trying to reconnect. Someone who kept reaching out until he finally accepted what her actions had been telling him all along. She made him feel as though wanting normal affection and connection was somehow a burden. Instead of being honest, she chose comfort and avoidance. Now, she has to live with the consequences of that choice. The hardest truth is that nothing outside the marriage actually destroyed it. There wasn't an affair. There wasn't a major betrayal. There wasn't some dramatic event that tore them apart. She simply stopped wanting to be close to her own husband, and she made him feel guilty for wanting that closeness back. And when he finally believed what her actions had been saying all along, she was shocked that he left. She had plenty of chances, 9 of them, to be exact, over 17 days. Every time she pushed him away, and when he finally stopped asking, she smiled. So he gave her exactly what she'd asked for, a life without him in it. Now I'd love to hear your thoughts. At what point would you have walked away? Have you ever been on either side of a situation like this without realizing what was happening until it was too late? Let me know in the comments. In the end, Dana got exactly what she wanted, a husband who stopped reaching, stopped trying, and stopped making her feel pressured. She just never realized that version of the marriage eventually walks out the front door. The moment Dana smiled and called intimacy that other stuff, the marriage was already over. She just didn't realize it yet. Owen didn't yell. He didn't beg. He didn't argue or try to convince someone who had already made up her mind. He simply paid attention to what her actions were telling him. Then he made a plan, and in the end, he gave her exactly what she'd been asking for all along. His silence. Permanently. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more stories like this. And let me know your thoughts in the comments. At what point do you think Owen was right to walk away?